What is the difference between absentee voting and voting by mail?
So in our state, there is no difference. It's voting before election day.
But like, how do I know if I'm eligible to vote by mail this election? If I'm a college student, can I vote by mail?
Well, it just depends. You're going to have to go and look at the application, see if there's a reason that best fits your scenario. It could be, again, that situation where you are registered to vote back home in Whitley County, but you're going to school in Vanderburgh County. So being absent from the county on election day for the entire 12 hours is a reason. So if you want to vote by mail, my best advice is to get the application, see if one of those reasons best fits your scenario, and then pick the one that works for you, assuming it does, and then make sure you sign the application and get it turned into your county by October 22nd, 2020.
Yeah. Oh, and that was another one of my questions.
Okay.
Okay, so the deadline for absentee application is October 22nd. Is that a good deadline?
I think it depends on who you ask. Ultimately, a person who wants to vote absentee, if you're applying close to the deadline date to do that, you're assuming a type of risk, if you will, knowing that there may not be a turnaround time.
And one thing I've been telling students when I've been talking to them on campus is that, especially if you've already registered to vote, but you're wanting to vote by mail, apply as soon as you can. Like, it will never hurt you to do it sooner rather than later, because, that way it just gives you more time counted, just giving yourself a good friendly cushion to make sure that everything works out.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And the only thing I'd probably add to that, though, is you have to sort of be careful about registration. So if you've just newly registered to vote, and let's say you go online and you register to vote, that update is not made automatically. I think a lot of people just assume it's made automatically because that's how everything works in our systems. That's not how it works with voter registration. That information is shared with your county, right? It goes directly to your county, and the county has to review it and approve it. And there is no set deadline for them to get it done. And so once that's approved, then you're sent a voter registration card, and your registration goes into a pending period for 7 days. So if you're going back to the website and you're not seeing those updates, what we often see is people registering to vote 10, 15 times until they finally see what they need to be where they are currently living, but it just so happens that pending period has dropped off. And so now they can see their active registration at that address. And so the reason why I mentioned that is that if you are updating your, my lights are going out, that if you are in fact updating your registration, you don't want to apply right away for your absentee ballot. You do want to make sure that you're at least in pending status before you apply, because if your absentee application to vote by mail, for example, or if you go in to vote early, if you're in pending status, your application has to be set aside and then processed once you move out of pending, or if your registration information and your absentee application are not matching, that absentee application has to be rejected. And so that's why you just kind of want to be careful if you're trying to register to vote and apply for an absentee application at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. And then you kind of mentioned this earlier too, and I wasn't sure. I know it's been kind of fought in the courts a little bit, but I don't remember what the official decision was. Does my absentee ballot need to be received by election day or postmarked by election day?
So there is pending litigation about when your absentee ballot has to arrive. My best advice is to follow current law, make sure it's received by your county election board not later than noon on election day. That is current state, right? That is not current state, that's current law. Mm-hmm. But there is an injunction, right? There is an order from a court that says that any ballot that is postmarked by election day and received by not later than 10 days after the election or November 13th is to be counted. But this is all tied up in current court matters, and you never know if that decision is going to be overturned. So while it's true, what the court has ordered us and all the counties to do is if the ballot is postmarked by November 3rd and received not later than November 13th, it is to be counted. nothing is a sure thing right now until everything's in its final state, and we're not there yet. So I do my very best to make sure that my ballot is in by noon on election day, because we can't predict what the courts aren't or are going to do. But what I have to say as co-director under the judge's order, any ballot postmarked by the election and received by November 13th is to be counted, at least under this current order.
Sure.
Clear as mud?
Yeah, clear as mud.
Yeah,
But
yeah, right.
when in doubt, the sooner the better. That's like just generally,
Yes.
with
Yes.
registration, with applying for absentee, with sending in your ballot, the sooner the
Absolutely.
better. You're never going to be penalized for being like proactive and being ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Ooh, this was another frequently asked question by students.
Okay.
A lot of students are worried about, am I filling out my absentee ballot correctly? I don't want it to not be counted because I messed something up. It's really confusing. A lot of students, we are not elections attorneys, And so is there anything that usually trips people up when filling out their absentee ballot that may get their ballot, disqualified or not to be counted?
Another great question. So typically no. If you do what we call overvote or undervote in a race, so overvote means you make too many selections, or undervote means you don't make enough. If you, let's say, dog catcher's on the ballot and it's I don't know, there's two people on the ballot, but you like both people and you don't want to make a decision and you bubble in both names. Well, what's going to happen in that dog catcher race is that your vote in that one race is going to get tossed, but the rest of your ballot is still valid, right? It's just impacting that one race because there's no way to tabulate or determine who you wanted to vote for. So it makes sense that would null your ballot, right?
Yeah.
There's not your ballot, I'm sorry, your choices in that one race.
Sure.
There's always confusion about how straight party works.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I always talk about it is, I think of straight party like a shortcut. So if you pick, you've got three choices: Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. If you make one of those party choices, what's going to happen is that for all races where you can only vote for one person, if they're affiliated with that political party, they are going to get your vote. So that means you don't have to go into every single race because your wrist hurts or whatever and you don't want to mark it, right? So that's kind of a shortcut, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing a straight party does not do is pick up votes for at-large races. So you might have a county council at-large race where you can vote up to 3 people for that race, even if they're Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, and you picked one of those straight party options. For those, you do have to go in and make individual marks. If you have school board candidates on the ballot, which you do, those will have to be individual marks. Judicial retention questions, public questions, those are all nonpartisan, so clearly your partisan party choice is not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have to use straight party? Absolutely not. You can skip right over it and get into the meat of your ballot and go through and make individual selections all the way through. So if that's easier for you to understand how to move forward with your ballot, that's the way to go and do it. The last thing I would add too is what I often see is that people will pick straight party and then still go in and make individual selections. So again, because straight party is kind of that general choice, if you go in and make an individual selection, whatever individual mark you make in those offices trumps what you picked for straight party. So the individual choices are always more specific than that general selection of a straight party. I don't know if that helps or not, or makes it more confusing.
It does.
But yeah, so like, again, straight party is just the general shortcut choice. You can always make more specific selections or you can skip over it.
And you can still vote straight party by filling in every individual candidate. They just all happen to be the same party.
Yes,
you don't
absolutely.
have to do that. Like, so if I want to vote for all Republicans, then I can either fill in every single Republican or just vote or just click the Republican straight ticket.
Yes. Yep. And then even if you pick Republican straight ticket, if there's 1 or 2 Democrats you want to vote for, you can go in and pick Democrats in those races. It's not going to turn off the Republican choices. It's just going to click over and pick up those choices for those 2 Democrats in those 2 seats.
Okay.
So, and at that point, honestly, when you're talking about absentee voting in particular, when people are talking about their ballot getting counted, if your ballot is at that point accepted and taken over to the tabulator, it's being counted, right? And if you went through and you decided you were going to bubble in every single oval in the ballot, you could certainly do that. It's just not going to count for anything, but you can do that, right? The issue where people hear about things being rejected is through the review process. And that happens on election day. Actually, the first thing starts before election day. And that is every county with a bipartisan team is going to do a signature review and double check the application signature compares or comports with the signature that's on your ballot envelope, right? And so they'll do that again on election day, but then they're going to do things like making sure there are 2 sets of initials on the back of your ballot, that the ballot envelope hasn't been tampered with, that you didn't accidentally stick a second ballot in there, because I don't know how that would happen, but you got 2 ballots, right? So the bipartisan teams on election day are going to go through and sort of look through state law and make sure that everything aligns. And assuming you get through that review process, once that card is out of the envelope and there's 2 sets of initials on it, then you're in good shape.
Sweet. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, you hear the horror stories of like, oh no, I forgot to put, 2 sets of initials and stuff like that. And like, it is really confusing, especially for new voters,
Yeah.
Oh.
And the voter doesn't, of course, apply those initials. So that's something, if you're a new voter and you're voting by mail, you always just want to double check that you have the right precinct ballot. And you can do that by looking at your ballot. It should list the precinct on there. And then there's a label on the outside of your return envelope that has your precinct on it. And that's how you can double check that you got the right ballot. And then you can double check too that you have 2 sets of initials. And if you're missing 2 sets of initials or you've got the wrong ballot, call your county. They can reissue you a new ballot. You just have to fill out an affidavit with them, and then they can send you a new ballot. So there are ways to troubleshoot, back to your point, Anna, doing things early, means that if you find a problem, you can fix it. It's just when people identify problems leading up to the election and the days leading up to the election, it's way more difficult to try to troubleshoot and help the voter.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, this is another specific question that students had.
Okay.
So they said, I applied for and received my absentee ballot, but now I'm wanting to vote in person. Can I do that? Is that an option?
Kind of. So the whole point of requesting an absentee ballot to vote by mail is that you have a reason, right? And that reason is that you're out of the county, or that you expect to be confined. And so we don't often hear, at least not until this election cycle, people who wanted to vote in person on election day. So if you're voting by mail, I mean, I would say if you've made that choice, you've made that choice. Mm-hmm. In our system, you will be considered an absentee voter. And the only way that you can change your mind, if you will, is if you bring your absentee ballot to your polling place on election day, turn it over to the inspector. It's one of the poll workers there. They will reject your absentee ballot, and then you can vote a regular ballot if otherwise eligible. So again, once you've applied for an absentee ballot, you can't cancel it. You are an absentee voter, and if you will be marked as an absentee voter in the poll list. And if you show up to your polling place on election day without that ballot, you're not going to be permitted to vote because you've been issued a ballot already for the election.
Okay. I think probably I wouldn't recommend students, again, this is not legal advice, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that students do that, just because it is tricky. But maybe like if you're really, really kind of close and you don't think that they'll receive your ballot by election day, taking it in and surrendering your ballot, that would probably be the best reason to do that.
Either that, or truly complete your absentee ballot and then just hand deliver it to your county election board. Under our state law, you can only hand deliver ballots by the voter. The voter can drop their own ballot off.